Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be talking to you about 8 history podcasts that I think are particularly good. This is part of my 8 That Are Great mini-series, which is kind of 8 recommendations on a particular topic, and I'm doing this in honour of the History Challenge which is going on at the moment. Now I know what you're thinking, this is a booktube channel, so why on earth am I talking about podcasts? But I actually find podcasts to be really helpful, specifically when looking at history, because history is such a broad topic of which there is so much to learn that I often find that podcasts can be helpful to be able to kind of take bite-sized chunks of it to then work out what I would like to actually dedicate my time to a full book for. So like I said, I've got 8 today to talk about, and I'm also going to be recommending some particular episodes from those podcasts. This is obviously not the sum total of podcasts out there, and I do have some other ones that I know that exist and haven't checked out yet, which I definitely want to try and get to soon. So the first one I want to recommend is really for me the podcast that started it all for actually looking into non-book related podcasts, and that is You're Dead to Me, which is hosted by Greg Jenner. This is part of the BBC Sounds range. It is commissioned by the BBC, and Greg Jenner is actually one of the writers for the BBC series Horrible Histories, which is based off of the books that were a major part of my childhood. I don't know about you. So the way it works is each week Greg Jenner has on an expert and then a celebrity comedian guest, and then they talk about a particular topic. They're roughly 45 minutes long, and what I really enjoy about them is there's the So What Do You Know, which talks about the general kind of common knowledge about the topic, but then they do end up quizzing the celebrity at the end with What Do You Know Now? And it's really interesting seeing how well the celebrity does in remembering things, and it's really fun seeing some of the celebrities really get into kind of the topic and show some real enthusiasm and excitement for a subject that they know nothing about, and it's lovely to see that interaction between the three of them. So for me, I would recommend, I've listened to nearly all of them. I think I haven't listened to the most recent one, and I might have missed 1 or 2 in the back catalogue, but I have pretty much been listened to all of the content, and I would recommend the Aztecs, which was excellent. Also Mansa Musa, fascinating character, richest man ever to live, very cool. And basically anything that has Sarah Pascal as a guest, because her enthusiasm for history is so heartwarming and so lovely, and she's really funny. So whenever she's a guest, I would also recommend her. The next one I have to recommend is called You're Wrong About. Now this is hosted by Sarah and Mike, and this is kind of almost like a contemporary history podcast. They do have 1 or 2 episodes that focus on historical figures, but they're actually looking at things that have happened in kind of living memory that you are wrong about in some way, shape or form, where the general public consensus or the way that the media treated it is wrong in some way. So sometimes this can be about particular celebrities or people who are in the public eye for a period of time. Sometimes it's about particular phenomena, sometimes it's about sort of social trends, and they are absolutely fascinating. I would still consider these to be like a history podcast because it's looking at modern history and the way that things are almost being recorded now, and when you're talking about things that were in the 80s or the 90s, I think we're now reaching a stage where you can start to call those history. So some of my favourite podcasts that have a more specifically history slant is The History of Disco and its connections with the black community and the queer community, and why the Disco Sucks movement really had a bunch of racist and homophobic undertones. And also I really liked their episode about Marie Antoinette with a guest on the show. I can't remember the name of the guest, I'm really sorry. Generally I also just enjoy this podcast. I've binged so much of their, so many of their episodes. They've done one on Ebonics, which is very cool. They've done one on human trafficking, which is so relevant that they revisited it because of the ridiculous Wayfarer conspiracy that came out back in June. Very cool, would totally recommend. The next one I want to talk about is actually a newish one for me, and this was recommended to me by Justin from Ghost Reader, who is co-hosting with me for this readathon, and that is Revolutions by Mike. I don't have anybody's surnames written down, I hope that's okay. So this is a huge podcast where Mike goes through various revolutions that have happened historically, really painstaking, looking at the major players, the major kind of social and political reasons, and each season is dedicated to a different revolution. I'm about 6 or 7 episodes into the Mexican Revolution at the moment, and I'm absolutely loving it. It is exactly what I was looking for after reading Mexican Gothic, so I really appreciate it. Now he doesn't have a guest, there's no back and forth, which I personally really like in my podcast. It's more of a strict kind of 30 to 40 minute mini lecture on whatever part, and they do follow in a linear fashion, so you do probably need to jump in at the beginning beginning of whatever revolution you're interested in. But if you do like Mike's style, he also has a bunch of other podcasts that talk about the history of the Byzantium era, the history of the Romans, I believe. He has a book called The Storm Before the Storm, which is about the generation of Roman leaders just before Julius Caesar and when it all went horribly wrong. And he's working on a book at the moment about Lafayette. So this man knows his history and is an absolute busy bee churning out the content. So I think one to keep an eye on. If you like his style, there's so much out there for you. The next one I wanted to talk about is Deviant Women. This one I absolutely love. So this is hosted by Alicia and Lauren, who are two amazing Australian women who have the best Australian accents ever. And what it is they're looking at women from history, contemporaneity and folklore and myth. I think I've said all that correctly. And they kind of take it in turns to do a deep dive research and explain to the other one about this person in history. I've listened to quite a few. They're normally quite long, at least an hour, sometimes pushing on to 2 hours. So they're a bit more of a commitment when it comes to how much time you're going to need to dedicate to it. But I think that they are fantastic and they have such really interesting nuanced discussions. I especially liked their one on Marie Laveau. Amazing. And also their one on Qing Shi, who was a pirate, a Chinese pirate, who ridiculously cool woman. Then we're now moving into the realm of ones that I have listened to only a few episodes of, but I have really enjoyed everything I've listened to so far. So within that we have History is Gay, which is hosted by Leah and Gretchen, but I believe that they are about to be changing one of their hosts and I'm not too sure who. The one that I listened to had a guest host on it, but I listened to one on Alan Turing. Fascinating. Not much that I didn't already know because of various movies and things, but they do also talk about the portrayal of the historical person in the movie, of Alan Turing in the movie, and also just this idea of like, can we say that they're gay or not? And I think that that segment at the end is really interesting because when you're looking back through history, it can be difficult sometimes and inappropriate sometimes to apply terms to people that were not available in their day. It's, you know, it's kind of an anachronism to try and apply that term, and it's trying to understand how would they personally see their identity now and what can and can't we claim compared to what has been sort of hidden away. So I think that that's generally a really interesting sub-discussion that they're having in the podcast, and I need to jump back in and listen to a few more of these. I listened to this one and then immediately found it wrong about, and then went on a binge that like took up so much time. I also have The Black History Buff, which is hosted by King Carouse. This one's really nice because it has a matching blog to go along with it, so you can go and see images and pictures and paintings and kind of check out more of the resources, which I really appreciate. They're also shorter, snappier kind of podcasts that are more on the like 15 to 20 minutes long, so sometimes they're really helpful for like when I'm getting ready in the morning rather than kind of committing to a full hour to 2 hour long podcast. My favourite one so far of those has been Miss Lala, who was a Polish black acrobat. Obviously the Black History Buff, it is about black people through history. It kind of says it on the tin. Miss Lala was a black Polish acrobat. She did a hair hang and a teeth hang, I believe, which from my like acrobatics days and kind of circus days I really appreciate. And she's also the model for one of Degas' most famous paintings, which I love that painting, so it was really cool finding out more about the model entirely by coincidence. Continuing on, we have two more to talk about. It wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't find a way to mention dinosaurs in there in some way, and for this one I'm going to recommend Terrible Lizards. Now this is hosted by Izzy and Lawrence? I'm not 100% certain anymore, but there's always a guest speaker who is talking about a particular area of dinosaurs in some way, shape or form. It's difficult for me to recommend a particular one. I've kind of listened to weird bits jumping around from lots of them. There is one on the weird, quirky, wacky dinosaurs that were out there, and I definitely enjoyed that one. I thought that there were some very cool things. With it being something that is talking about very like visual, like dinosaur species, it was helpful to have Google up to try and like check out some of the paleo art based on these species. But yeah, really enjoyable, and obviously it's about dinosaurs, so I'm here for it. And then the final one I have to recommend is the History Extra podcast. Now this is actually, the History Extra is I believe a magazine that is in America. I'm not too sure about that. And this is a podcast that goes alongside and is looking at kind of interviews with authors and sort of is hosted by a lot of different people and then has a lot of different guests. So for this one, I'd actually recommend more like jumping around and just checking out the topics that interest you. And it's a bit more hit and miss for me because you don't have that consistency of who is presenting and who is talking. But I do enjoy it. I think it's been really interesting to see what kind of books are up and coming, and it's a way of kind of getting to know some authors a little bit more. And I do think that it's a real like one-stop shop for all of history, where you can really kind of pick out individual particular areas and then probably use it as a jumping off point to find out about more things. So those are 8 podcasts about history that I absolutely love and think that are great and think you should totally check out. Like I said, I do have a few more on my list that I haven't listened to any episodes of yet, but I'm excited to try at some point soon. So let me know if you have any recommendations for history podcasts down below. Where else do you get some of your non-fiction content from? I feel like there's always this big focus on reading, obviously within BookTube, but actually it can be just as enjoyable to curl up with a podcast, and it's very, very similar in some ways to an audiobook. So for me, I think that they are a really integral core part of my like non-fiction content consumption, regardless of whether it's reading technically or not. So have a wonderful reading week, and I will chat to you soon. Bye.